Well, welcome back to chapter 12. And in chapter 11, we basically defined learning and looked at different ways that we could assess learning. In this chapter, we're going to actually look at the stages of learning, going from a beginner or a novice, and then practicing, and then getting to a proficient level of performance. So you've already viewed the video that I listed the link here, which basically was the popular Fitz and Posner's three-stage theory. As we look at the different theories in this chapter, remember that the idea is that you go through very distinct stages as you learn a motor skill. The Fitz and Posner model has three parts to it. Again, view the video if you have not yet done that. The cognitive stage, again, mental aspect of learning the skill. As a performer, there's going to be a whole lot of errors. Try and just get an idea of, what you're supposed to do. So expect a lot of errors, not much consistency. And as a practitioner, if you're the coach or the therapist, you want to provide lots and lots of corrective feedback. You want to inform what they're doing correctly and what they're not doing correctly. So corrective feedback. In stage 2, as they continue to practice and get better, the second stage of Fitz and Posner model is called the associative stage. And here the performer has the basic fundamentals down. It looks like the skill. They're more consistent. There's fewer errors. Again, as the practitioner working with someone in the associative stage, you want to make sure you provide a good practice organization, so they're going to have lots of opportunities to practice the skill. And we use the terms refining and extending. And refining a skill is, I'd say, tweaking it, trying to bring it together to the very best of your ability. And extending a skill means adding on to a skill. So for instance, if I was doing a basketball jump shot, a refining of that skill would be working on the flip of the wrist, making sure I get good follow through. That would be refining the skill. If I wanted to extend that same skill, now I would perhaps dribble down the court, stop, fake, do a jump shot, or maybe catch a pass, bounce pass from someone, take the shot. So refining versus extending. That would be what I would do during the associative stage of learning. Final stage, the autonomous stage, sounds like automatic, right? And here the skill is automatic or habitual. So this is when you are at the stage where you don't even have to think about it. The skill just comes naturally. At this stage, the performer can detect their own errors. So as a coach or a practitioner, your role will change. Doesn't mean learning has stopped. It just is learning at a different level. So as you work with someone at the autonomous stage, much more emphasis would be on the tactical part of the skill as long and at the strategies of the skill. So if you have someone who's at the autonomous stage, now you're going to provide more tactical and strategy information as they practice the skill. So again, that's a review for Fitz and Posner. If you haven't looked at the video, I encourage you to go back and review that now. Gentile, who we've talked about before, remember Gentile we discussed in chapter 1. She had the 16 categories of her taxonomy for classifying skills. Well, she's also developed this two-stage model of stages of learning a motor skill. And it's basically called the initial stage, which is just getting the idea of the movement, and then the latter stage or later stage. This is where we work on fixation and diversification. So let's quickly look at those two. At the initial stage, again, you're getting an idea of the movement pattern. You're having some success. You're not real consistent, but you're getting an idea of what it feels like to perform this skill. And so as a beginner is in their environment, they're going to begin to match the regulatory conditions and how that influences their movement. So the environment plays a role in what regulatory conditions one should attend to. So this discrimination between regulatory conditions, remember a regulatory condition is anything that regulates the movement, that has an effect on the movement, versus non-regulatory conditions. So a performer at the initial stage would be taking information from the environment and making decisions about what's necessary in order to be successful in performing the skill. The regulatory conditions are those things that directly influence the movement. Non-regulatory conditions are those aspects of the environment that would not have an influence of achieving your performance goal. So that would be Gentile's initial stage of learning. She would say beginners need to explore a variety of movement possibilities at this stage. A lot of trial and error, getting a sense of what works, what doesn't work. Self-discovery. How many different ways can the body move? What's the most efficient way? Problem solving. And so, especially if you're working with younger children, this is a great approach to take as they are trying to learn different motor skills. Allow for them to explore, to discover, to problem solve. So provide lots of opportunities for the learner to develop the basic movement pattern, lots of different ways to practice. And again, provide the environment where the performer can discriminate between what's important to attend to, what has influences on the movement, and what does not. That's Gentile's initial stage of learning. I'd like to finish with this first stage by just saying this gives the learner a framework for organizing efficient movement. But again, this movement is not consistent and it lacks efficiency of movement. So again, I like the idea of the initial stage providing a framework for organizing effective movement. In the second stage, which Gentile calls the later stage, two terms we use would be fixation and diversification. So once the performer has a pretty good idea of the movement and what's necessary to be successful in performing that movement, we would look at closed sport skills. And again, review a closed skill means there's very little variability with the skill. And we use the term fixation is related to closed skills. And refinement is the goal. So going back to my earlier example, if I was shooting a free throw, refinement would be just working on my follow through. Refinement might also include putting a little stress on myself, make it more game-like. The term diversification, we use that related more to open skills. And we want to diversify. We want to, again, use the term extension of the basic skill. So here in diversification, the idea is variability. How many different ways will I need to perform that skill? So for the basketball jump shot, for instance, now I'm dribbling down the court, faking a pass, I'm jumping and shooting, maybe 10 feet in, 12 feet in, change my distances, change my areas on the court, change whether I'm dribbling or I'm catching a pass, change if someone's guarding me. So diversification is basically looking at how many different ways can I perform this open skill, and what ways may I have to do that in a game-like situation. So fixation, diversification are the two terms used in Gentile's later stage. The performer learns to adapt to a variety of environments. And again, we are becoming much more consistent at this stage and accurate. So I'm learning to take the skill and apply it across various settings, various contexts, and I'm more consistent and proficient and successful in performing the skill. Gentile's later stage. And it doesn't take as much effort. I become more efficient and effective in the performance of the skill. As a professional, if I'm in stage 1 of Gentile's model, my goal is to just provide basic movement patterns, whether it's open or closed. Lots and lots of opportunities to practice. In the second stage, for closed skills, I want to require a structure similar to the performance. So I'm going to, if it's a free throw shot, which is a closed skill, I'm going to try to make it as game-like as I can, refining the movements of that closed skill. If it's an open skill, again, I'm going to vary the conditions and practice in ways. How many different ways will they need to be able to perform that skill in real life or in the real game? At that good closing point, I think, Bernstein is a gentleman who's come up with interesting concept. There's about a page and a half discussing Bernstein's ideas. He's best remembered, as we talked about, degrees of freedom problem, freezing the limb, freeing the limb. You remember from chapter 5, we talked about Bernstein. He says learning a skill is similar to problem solving. And he talks about stages of a play that has many phases in it. And he's famous for this term, repetition without repetition. And I probably will put up a video clip regarding Bernstein and his ideas. But this concept of repetition without repetition. As we practice motor skills, rather than just practicing the same skill over and over and over again, he puts greater emphasis on the process. So the process of performing a motor skill rather than doing the same motor skill over and over and over again. It's an interesting concept. And again, I'll put up a video clip that will go into much greater detail about Bernstein and his ideas. I'll close with this quote from Bernstein, though. I think it's a great quote. The point is that during a correctly organized exercise, a student is repeating many times, not the means for solving a given motor problem, but the process of its solution, the changing and improving of the means. So again, his emphasis is not necessarily on repeating the same motor skill over and over again, but it's on repeating the process, and every time you go through the process, it may be a different performance. So it's repetition, yes, but without repetition. Repeating the process and learning the process and how to perform in a variety of ways to get to the solution, but not doing the same skill the same way over and over and over again. So Bernstein has had a great influence on how we practice motor skills. So that's it for now. I'll come back with the second part of chapter 12 in another video.